right, so today we're going to get into part 12 of the teaching on the search for the doctrine of grace. Now, just as a sort of a recap, what we're doing here is we're trying to understand what grace is all about. Now, we called it the search for the doctrine of grace because we wanted to see if there was actually a doctrine called grace. And one of the things we haven't mentioned in a couple of parts is that we really haven't seen anything that sounds like a doctrine, have we? Okay, we've seen that grace is not what we thought it was. We thought it was unmerited favor. We've come to find out it's actually merited favor, that it's approval, to be found in good standing with. And that's something we've done in taking every verse that covers the idea of grace. Now, something that's come up recently is that there is a difference of opinion as to what words were translated for grace. And so I want to just clarify something. There's a book that was put out by Avi ben Mordechai called Messiah. It has 3 volumes, and in Messiah Volume 1, in defining terms, he chose to define grace, and he began in defining grace with the words chen and charis, just like we did. He decided to use chen and charis, and then he went on to chesed and elios. And so here's what I want to make sure that we're putting out there. The reason I chose chen and charis is because the verses that are used by the mainstream churches to make an argument on grace versus the law, those verses use charis. They don't use elios. So I chose the verses that use the word that's problematic. Because that was the whole point of this, is to figure out what grace really is. Because haven't we not heard, till we're really, as tired of hearing it as we can possibly be, this idea that we're no longer under law, we're under grace. We've all heard that, ad nauseum. But the verses that they use in the places that we've been now covering in Paul's writings especially, those verses are using the word charis. Now, the Hebrew complement to charis is chen. So Avi agrees with that because he says chen and charis. Now you have to understand though, when people are putting together these books and these writings and these teachings, they're choosing words based on their particular agenda. I did also. My agenda was to pick the words that were being used in the verses that were causing all the problem. The agenda, though, of Avi in Messiah 1, as I'm reading, and others who've done teachings about this, has been to pick the words that mean unmerited favor, because they already believe that that's what grace is. And so that's where we end up with chesed and elios. Because chesed means mercy and compassion, something that's unmerited. Because you give someone mercy they don't deserve. Mercy is something that you give someone and they don't deserve it, but you give them mercy anyway. They deserve something else, but you give them mercy. And elios has a similar understanding in the Greek. And so it's translated that way all over the place in the Greek. And so there was a different agenda here. So in case it comes up in discussion, well, why is it that you're using chen and charis and not chesed and elios? Well, because the chen and charis are the ones that underline the verses that are actually at issue. Because it's not about the definition that's at issue. I'm not looking for the unmerited favor. I'm looking for what did the word mean when Paul said, you're saved by grace but not of works, blah, blah, blah. What did he mean in that? What word is in that verse? You understand what I'm saying? And so it's very important that we're using the correct underlying Greek words in the verses where the problem is, where the issue is. And so I just wanted to take a moment to clarify that, because there are those out there that would make this point. Of course, you have Avi's book here that's been out since 2000 that makes also this similar, has this point in it about chen and charis, which, by the way, is the first choice he gives, is chen and charis. But he doesn't really like that choice because when you look at chen and charis, chen appears in the Tanakh a whole lot more. Let's see if we have here. So we have chen appears only 39 times in the King James, and charis appears 131. So he didn't really like the idea necessarily that there was more grace in the New Testament than the Old. So then he went with chesed and elios, where chesed appears 251 times in the Tanakh, and elios only 50 times, making there five times more grace in the Old than the New. So you see an agenda playing out. He wanted to find some way to prove that there was more grace in the Old Testament. Now, there is more unmerited favor in the Old Testament. I don't disagree with that at all. There is more chesed than there is elios. But that's not what we're studying here today with this teaching. Is that fair? We're studying to try to understand what is it that especially Rav Shaul was talking about when he was talking about grace, since he did most of the talking about grace. Out of the 156 times it appears in the Brit Chadashah, 102 plus of them are Paul. And so he did more than 2/3 of the conversation on the word. And actually, if you include Hebrews and Acts, it comes out to almost 130 of the 156. So most of what's in there is something that Paul's talking about. So we're trying to understand that to get proper perspective. So hopefully that makes some sense. So I just felt like I needed to clarify that. Now let's continue in our study and our journey. So what we've done so far, to recap, is we did all of the verses that have the word chen in it in the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh. We also covered all of the places where charis appears, where the word grace would appear in the 4 Gospels, in the writings of John, James, and Peter. And so having finished all that, we're now reading the writings of Paul. And so we've gotten through Galatians, and we're now in Ephesians. We're in Ephesians chapter 1, and we also got through Galatians, 1 Corinthians, and 2 Corinthians, so we did cover quite a little bit there, and now we are in Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 1, the word appears in verse 2, 6, and 7. It appears 3 times in chapter 1, and we're going to read most of chapter 1. We're beginning in verse 1. Shaul, an emissary of Yeshua Messiah, by the desire of Elohim, to the set-apart ones who are in Ephesus, and true to Messiah Yeshua. Favor to you. Now notice he starts out, he's saying, to the set-apart ones in Ephesus who are true to Messiah. So look who's talking to. These are ones who are set apart, are kadosh, who are true to Messiah. He says, approval or favor to you and peace from Elohim our Father and the Master Yeshua Messiah. A very reasonable thing to wish on those that are set apart and true to Messiah. Favor, approval, be in good standing and peace from Elohim our Father and Master Yeshua Messiah. Again, I'll ask the question we've asked many times. Does it make sense in here at this point that he would be saying, unmerited, undeserved favor to you and peace? Why would he say something like that? He just said, to those of you that are set apart and are true to Messiah, I wish you unmerited, undeserved favor. See, we don't ask these questions when we see the verse and see, well, does it make sense to put in the other understanding at all? He says, favor to you and peace from Elohim our Father and Master Yeshua Messiah. Blessed be the Elohim of the Father of our Master Yeshua Messiah, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies in Messiah, even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be set apart and blameless before him in love. So he says, blessed be the Elohim of the Father of Yeshua, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing. And then he says that we are set apart and blameless. And that's the whole thing. We were set apart or selected or known from before the foundation. We were chosen before the foundation of the world. For what? To be set apart and blameless. Those are things that only happen by your effort. You have to do or not do things to be set apart and blameless. He continues and says, so he's set apart and blameless before him in love. So before him has the idea that you're doing this in front of him. And we do this in love. That is what we wrap everything around, is in love. He says, having previously ordained us to the adoption as sons through Yeshua Messiah to himself, according to the good pleasure of his desire. So it was his good pleasure and his desire that we do these things. He chose us from the foundation of the world. But why did he choose us? He chose us because he knew what we would do with the choosing. Because he knows the end from the beginning. So he knew when he chose us what we would do and what we would not do. He says, it was his good pleasure and his desire to the praise of the esteem of his favor with which he favored us in the beloved. So now we get that word in there, grace or charis. He says to the praise of the esteem of his approval with which he has approved us in the beloved. Now, I want to reread that with the old understanding. Okay, having previously, we'll go back to verse 5, having previously ordained us to the adoption as sons through Yeshua Messiah to himself, according to the good pleasure of his desire, to the praise of the esteem of his unmerited favor, with which the unmerited favored us in the beloved. Does that make any sense? Why would he choose us to be set apart and blameless and it all be unmerited and there's no connection? We'll read it the other way. He says, having previously ordained us to adoption as sons through the Yeshua Messiah to himself, according to his good pleasure of his desire, to the praise of his esteem of his approval, with which he approved us in the beloved, in whom we have a redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of trespass, according to the richness of his favor. I think that makes a whole lot more sense when you read it that way. Continuing, which he has lavished on us in all wisdom and insight, having made known to us the secret of his desire, according to his good pleasure, with which he purposed to him, to administer at the completion of time, to gather together in one, all in Messiah, both which are in the heavens and which are on the earth in him, in whom also we did obtain an inheritance, being previously ordained according to the purpose of him, working all matters according to the counsel of his desire. Okay, so here we have, excuse me, in verse 7 it talked about to whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of trespass according to the riches of his favor. So again, we have forgiveness of trespass. Why? Because of the richness of his approval. It has to do with approval. It's not unmerited. He doesn't just forgive our trespasses for no reason. By the way, I got to hear a very scary presentation by a mainstream speaker on TV the other day where he made the argument that forgiveness is not something we do first and then he forgives us. Forgiveness is something he does first and then we forgive others. I beg to differ. In Matthew, in the model prayer, in Matthew, it says, if you, I'm going to read it to you, it says, if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither shall your Father forgive your trespasses. Verse 14 in Matthew 6 says, for if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father shall forgive you. Who does it first? You do. So I beg to differ with this very popular big-name person on TV who made the argument that no, we're unmerited favor. We're getting all this forgiveness, all undeserved because we didn't do anything. Well, I'm sorry, but it says, if you forgive, then your Father will forgive you. So you actually have to do something which brings approval. Guess what? If you forgive men their trespasses, your Father approves of that. It puts you in good standing with him. He looks down and smiles and says, that was good. That was well done. I approve of your forgiving your brother and your father and your sister and your cousin and your friend and everybody else their trespasses. Therefore, I'm going to forgive yours. And so that's merited. And that's right out of the mouth of Messiah himself. This is the model prayer in Matthew chapter 6. Yet I heard this mainstream gentleman making this argument that, oh no, it's unmerited grace. It's all grace, which is unmerited favor. And so he forgives us first, and then we're excited about him. No, he gets our attention first and tells us there's a path to be forgiven. He gets our attention first and lets us know there's redemption and forgiveness of sin, so that we can then seek to figure out how to get it. Isn't that what we all have done? That you found out that there was forgiveness, there was redemption, there was a path, and you then said, I need to figure out how. What do I have to do? How does this work? What needs to be done? You wanted to know how. And so there is a how, and what part of it is in the model prayer. He says, look, you have to forgive other men. And then if that wasn't clear enough, in verse 15 he says, because if you do not forgive them, neither shall your Father. So when I did the teaching on forgiveness, that was one of the main points. Hey, you need to forgive because otherwise you don't get forgiven. Forget about whether or not they asked for forgiveness or deserved it. This is not grace that you're pouring out. This is mercy. It's compassion. And so in mercy and compassion, you forgive those who have not asked for it, or nor do they necessarily deserve it. But your Father will not forgive you if you don't learn to forgive others. Because when you want forgiveness, you don't deserve it either. You've earned something. You did something that earned death, quite frankly. And so you don't deserve the forgiveness either. But you can ask for the mercy and the compassion that brings the forgiveness. Then you can repent. What does repentance mean? To turn around, go back on the path to doing rightly, which is what righteousness is. By the way, I think that is one of the biggest horrible problems in the mainstream churches today, is that they use the word righteousness, and righteousness, they have no idea what this means. It's very simple. It means to do what is right. Which means there's actually something that is right and something that is wrong. So you can do what is wrong, we call that sin. And you can do what is right, we call that righteousness. And what defines right and wrong? The Torah does. And so, of course, the mainstream has a complete disconnect with the Torah. So how can they be preaching that we're supposed to live righteous lives when they've disconnected the only path to righteousness? They've completely taken that out of the discussion, out of the mix. So as we're looking through this, we have here, he says, look, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of trespasses according to the riches of his approval. Now, when we see the forgiveness of trespasses, we should go back to Messiah's words, which say, if you forgive others, you will be forgiven. If you don't, you won't. It's not complicated, but it's dead serious. So that's another place the word favor comes in verse 7. And then he continues on, and he goes, having made known to us the secret of his desire according to the good pleasure of his purposes, etc. And so what is he letting us know? He knows that there's a path to all of this, a path to the kingdom, and it's in the Tanakh, it's in the commandments, wrapped around and fully embraced through the walking out of the fruit of the Spirit. That's what is the secret. He's trying to say, look, there's a secret to this. Walk in the Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, patience, etc., and walk out the commandments. And believe in Messiah Yeshua. Revelation makes it clear. These are those with what? The testimony of Yeshua and the commandments. Those are the two things you need. And to walk it out in belief, which bears fruit, the fruit of what? The fruit of the Spirit, in love, joy, peace, patience, etc. Galatians 5:22-23. So it continues and he says, verse 11, he says, in whom we also did obtain an inheritance, being previously ordained according to the purpose of him working all according to the counsel of his desire. So we're supposed to be working all. We're doing all according to the counsel of his desire. For us to be appraised and in esteem, thus having first trusted in Messiah. How do we get to be appraised? Well, appraise has to do with, like, our children do that same thing. They want to do what's right and pleasing in our eyes, so they get a pat on the back or a pat on the head and said, attaboy, attagirl, great job, we love you, we're excited about you, we're proud of you, good job. That's what a praise is. The praise you receive from your parents is that you wanted to, at least you should have been wanting to receive from your parents was, hey, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. That was good what you did. Well, we're told how to get that same praise from our Heavenly Father. He tells us what brings that from Him. Doing what is right in His eyes. Important teaching to listen to. Whose eyes are you right in? Actually, that's one of the ones I don't think we have actually on the table. I need to make more. All right. Continuing, it says, in whom, verse 13, in whom you also, having heard the words of truth, the word of truth, the good news of your deliverance, in whom also, having believed, you were sealed with the set-apart Spirit of promise, who is the pledge of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession to the praise of His esteem. Now listen to what he says here. For this reason I too, having heard of your belief in the Master Yeshua and your love for all the set-apart ones, do not cease giving thanks for you, making mention of you in my prayers, that the Elohim of our Master Yeshua, Messiah, the Father of esteem, would give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of Him, the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, so that you know what is, now listen now, so that you know what is the expectation of His calling and what are the riches of the esteem of His inheritance in the set-apart ones. He wants you to understand and be enlightened to know what is the expectation. You know, what does He expect of you? What does the Almighty expect of you? I know you're going to be shocked when you hear, but we're going to go to Deuteronomy 10:12. In Deuteronomy 10:12, Moses says, and now, Yisrael, what does Yahweh your Elohim expect of you? What is He asking of you? And so when you're reading this, Paul clearly understood Deuteronomy 10:12. When he used the word expectation, I'm sure that he was alluding to, in some ways, Deuteronomy 10:12, which says, well, now Israel, what does Yahweh expect of you? But to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all His ways, and to love Him and to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and to guard the commandments of Yahweh and His laws, which I command you today, which, by the way, are for your good. Are for your good. And so that's a very good question asked here in this verse. He says, look, that the Elohim of your Master Yeshua, the Father of Him, would give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation. To what purpose? So that you know what is the expectation of His calling. What are the riches and the esteem of His inheritance? So you know what His calling was, and you know what your calling is. What was His calling? His calling was partially to let the dispersed, the scattered, know it's time to come home. the beginning of the regathering process of the lost Israelites. There's so many other aspects to his calling, but also so that you would know your calling. So your eyes of your understanding being enlightened so that you would know what is the expectation of his calling. He called you to repentance. He called you to walk in the truth. He calls you to walk in love. There's a lot of things he calls you to do. And that's supposed to be now revealed to you through the Spirit of wisdom in verse 17. Let's go now to chapter 2. Chapter 2, and we'll begin in verse 1. The word grace would appear here in 3 places, 5, 7, and 8. Verses 5, 7, and 8. We'll begin in verse 1. And you were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. All right, so we're going to get some contrast here in chapter 2. You were dead in your trespasses. I love the word trespass as opposed to just sin. What is trespassing? It's treading in an area that is not your permission to tread in. You've stepped on somebody else's territory. You have trespassed. You have breached a boundary. You've crossed a boundary you were not supposed to cross. You've trespassed. You've gone someplace you were not supposed to go. You've trespassed. He said, you were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of the world, according to we know who this is, the rule of the authority of the air, the spirit that is now working the sons of disobedience. So, this spirit, this trespassing, this sinning, is connected to disobedience. Disobedience to what? The Torah, the instructions of the Almighty. That's what the disobedience is to. He says, among whom also we once lived in the lusts of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath also, as also the rest. So he's saying, look, we all did this. We all walked in the flesh. So this is comparing the walking in the Spirit with the walking in the flesh, which was also compared in Galatians 5, when he said the fruit of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. And so he says it's our flesh, our desires of the flesh, the desires of our mind that lead us into these terrible places and make us by nature children of wrath. Anybody out there know any people that are angry, that are children of wrath? Part of the reason they're angry is because their life doesn't work. Things in their life are not working. Maybe everything in their life isn't working because there's only one path to what works. And until you find the path that works, you're going to find yourself frustrated and angry all the time. But also, as children of wrath, it alludes back to the idea that when you were in your trespassing, sin, and disobedience, you were at enmity, or you were an enemy to Yahweh. You were an enmity or an enemy to Yahweh. Continuing in verse 4, he says, but Elohim, who is rich in compassion, notice this now, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Messiah. By favor you have been saved. Now, let's play this out. In his compassion, his mercy, his chesed, by his great love, because he loves us, because just like a parent loves a child even when they're doing wrong. We don't love that they're doing what's wrong, we still love the child. They're always our child, we love them. We may not like what they're doing. By the way, they may not be getting grace or favor from you because they're not approved in what they're doing. But even though you don't approve of them, do you not have mercy and compassion on them? Do you not still love them? So in his great love, while we were in this terrible mess of behavior of disobedient, trespassing, and sin, in his compassion, even when we were dead in trespasses, he made us alive together with Messiah. In other words, he called you anyway. He got your attention through the Ruach, and he kind of tickled at the back of your head, and it probably wasn't even a tickle. It was maybe a hard slap in the back of the head. Got your attention and said, hello, wake up. There's a better way. There's a way that works. And in his mercy and compassion, when you deserved nothing more than death and nothing less, he called you anyway. That is mercy. That's unmerited. You didn't deserve that. You hadn't earned that. And so the words here are very well translated as compassion, as mercy. Who is rich in mercy could have been the same word translated there. Who is rich in unmerited favor, we could have stuck in there, because that's when he called us when we didn't deserve it. And then we have this last part of this verse stuck in there. And again, we don't know where to put punctuation. We don't know how to put the paragraph or the sentence breaks. It says, by favor you have been saved. So now notice how that flows, though. It says, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Messiah. What makes you alive? What makes you alive? When the young man came to Yeshua, it says, what do I need to have life, to have eternal life? What did Messiah say? Obey, keep the commandments. So now it's not mentioned here in this verse, but now we have definitely hinted at very clearly that even when we were dead in not having the law, not having the Torah, not keeping anything, we were disobedient, he made us alive together with Messiah. What is Messiah? Well, it's Yeshua, but what does Yeshua define himself as? I am the truth, he says in John 14. We know the truth in Psalm 119 is the Torah's truth, the Word is truth. We know that Yeshua is the Word in John 1 that put on flesh. So now it says, he made us alive together with Messiah, with the Torah, with the truth. And then he says, by approval we have been saved. Because we weren't approved in the trespasses, we were approved after we were made alive. Oh, the church doesn't teach that. All that stuff is going on in that one sentence there, and they miss it completely. He says, and raised us up together, verse 6, and made us sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah Yeshua. He raised us up together. Why? In order to show in the coming ages the exceeding richness of his approval in kindness towards us in Messiah. So he wants to have everybody see the approval so that we'd want the approval. If all people see is unmerited stuff, then why would anybody ever do anything to merit anything? And I'm sorry, but I've said this many times. If it's come as you are and stay that way and you don't have to do anything or change at all, and then you're all going to be in the kingdom together, that sounds like hell, not heaven. Because we're already there now. So if we're all going to be exactly the same as we are now, we're just going to be able to live forever, that doesn't sound very appealing to me. If it sounds appealing to you, I'm confused. I don't understand how that could be appealing to you. Because we're already having enough trouble dealing with each other because of how unmature we are, immature we are, how we lack the growth in our walk, and we're not walking out the spirit of it as well as the actual letter of it. Amen. Since we haven't gotten our Torah observance down and our walking in the Spirit down, we're not the type of people we'd want to live with forever, let alone that he'd want to live with forever. And this is all about becoming the type of person that the great creator of the universe would want to live with forever. So let's continue here. So he says that the reason this is happening, we're going back to this, by favor you've been saved in verse 5. I believe that makes complete sense in the fact that previous to that he said he made us alive together. Now, how does he make you alive when you were dead? Well, what made you dead? Trespasses and sin. What makes you alive? Truth and obedience. One brings you life, one brings you death. What does Moses say? He says, I lay before you life and death. Life if you obey the commandments, death if you don't. That's exactly laid out here in this one verse. He said, look, we were dead because we weren't obeying, and now we're made alive because we obey. And guess what? That brings approval. And that approval saves you. By approval, we are saved. He says, by that approval, by being in good standing, you have been saved. You were not saved when you were dead in your trespasses. You are delivered out of that ignorance into truth, and that delivers you, that saves you. And he said he raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah Yeshua in order, why? In order to show in the coming ages the exceeding riches, so that other people would see what doing this and walking this out brings. And so that you would say, hey, I want that. I see the result. I see the fruit of that behavior, of that decision process, of those choices, and I see the blessing, the abundance. I want that. And then we say, hey, I can do that. You know what does Paul say? Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Messiah. What does Messiah say? Imitate me as I imitate the Father. And so it's supposed to be something that you want because you see the fruit of it. It says, for by favor, verse 8, for by favor you've been saved through belief, and not of yourselves, it is the gift of Elohim. So now let's kind of work this one out. It says, it's not by works so that no one should boast. Okay. in order to show in the coming ages the exceeding richness of his favor and kindness towards us in Messiah Yeshua, for by approval, by his favor, by approval, or being in good standing, you have been delivered through belief. Let's break that down. You've been delivered through belief. If you didn't believe, would you do any of this stuff? No. You might do it for a little while mechanically, but if you didn't believe, you'd give up on it pretty quickly at some point. Because as the cares of the world and all the other things that happen in the parable of the sower start to try to choke you and rip out the roots and everything else, you would not hold strong. But it's through the power of your belief that you have deep roots and you cannot be uprooted by just a blow of wind or someone trying to tug you out of the ground. So he says, by or through belief, you have been, he says, for by favor or by grace or by approval, you have been saved through your belief. What does James define belief as? He says, I'll show you by belief by my works, my efforts, what I'm doing, the things that I do. He says, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of Elohim. So what is the gift of Elohim? Belief, not salvation. He says, through belief, and that not of yourselves, it's the gift of Elohim. We pray for Abba to give us more belief, to strengthen our belief. The belief is the gift from Elohim. He says, it is not by works so that no one should boast. What is not by works so no one should boast? The belief. The belief. That's your gift. He says, for by approval or by favor, grace, you have been saved through belief. And not of yourselves. It is the gift of Elohim. So, he's not saying that salvation is the gift. He's not saying that grace is the gift. Belief is the gift. And it is not by works so that no one should boast. The other way you could also read this not by works thing, remember we talked about the Greek word there also has to do with toil and effort. So it says it's not by your toil and effort so that you can boast that you did something through toil and effort. It's through obedience and submission and belief. It's not because, hey, I worked harder and I did all this effort. Quite frankly, Torah observance is effortless unless you're trying to be disobedient. There really isn't any effort to not eating pork. There isn't any effort to keeping the holy days instead of the pagan days. There really isn't any effort to not commit adultery unless you're walking in disobedience, or to not murder or to not steal. Unless you are walking in disobedience, then we have a problem. So that's in verse 9. Now we get to verse 10. For we are his workmanship created in Messiah Yeshua unto good works. So in case I was not clear prior, in case you thought maybe I was just way off in left field, Paul makes it really clear when he says, look, in verse 9 he says it's not by works so that no one should boast, but then he goes, for we are his workmanship created in Messiah unto good works, which Elohim prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So either he's a babbling idiot, because now he just said, look, it's not of works, but then we're created unto works. So we must have to go back and say, okay, how can we reconcile this? I think verse 10 is extremely clear. So it must be the problem in verse 9, because verse 10 says, we are his workmanship created in Messiah Yeshua unto good works, which Elohim prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So the good works are things that we walk in. We're told in Deuteronomy 10:2, we're to walk in all his ways. And we walk in the commandments. We walk in obedience. And so we have to go then back to verse 9 and go, it is not by works so that no one should boast. So what's not by works? Belief. You can't work up the belief. It's a gift. You pray for it. You ask Abba, fill me with belief. Strengthen my belief. That's the gift. You can't work up the belief. Have you ever tried it? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I threw that word in there. Whatever. Okay? You can't work up your belief. But Abba will give you opportunities to increase your belief. He'll place you in positions where if you obey him, if you trust him, that belief will come. Because you'll see the fruit of it, and then your belief will be strengthened. That's a gift. By the way, when he puts you in trials, that's part of the gift. Because in the trial, if you start to try on your own to do works and fix it out yourself, that's the works, by the way. Oh, I'm in a trial. I'm going to fix this myself. That doesn't work, does it? It doesn't get you the results you want when you try to fix it yourself. But then when you submit yourself to him and say, okay, I'm going to trust you, I'm going to believe you, and then it works because he works it out, because you trusted him, you believed him, guess what gets strengthened? Your belief. That's a gift. That's a gift. So hopefully that's clear when we get here to verse 10. Because verse 10 takes all that other stuff and puts into a nice bookend. You have, beginning at verse 1, that you were dead in trespasses and sin. You were walking, notice this, you were walking in a certain way. And then we get to verse 10, and now you're walking in a different way. One was leading to death, when you were dead in your trespasses and walking according to the world, according to the rulership of the prince of the power of the air, the authority of the air. When you were walking in this sort of way, led to death, but now we were made alive in Messiah, the truth, the Torah, the Savior, all that means, not just one little piece of it. And we're raised up together in order to show in the coming ages the exceeding riches that, hey, by approval we are saved. By disapproval, we're dead in our trespasses. It totally makes sense. It has to. There's nothing else that would make sense. Why would by unmerited favor and undeserved anything, you're saved and delivered and you're going to be in the kingdom and you don't have to do anything? Do you want to be in that place? Listen, you're not that dumb. Why would you think the creator of the universe is that dumb? I mean, really, I think that most people, without saying it consciously, think that the great creator of the universe is an idiot. They do. They act like he's an idiot. They think like he's an idiot. They talk like he's an idiot. They walk out their lives like he's an idiot because they're not going to understand that you and your fleshly being dumb, that we are idiots, we wouldn't act that way. You would not have that kind of a standard to say, hey, I'm going to give you unmerited favor. Keep doing whatever you're doing. That's all great. You're saved and delivered, and we're going to give you exceeding riches and all this wonderful stuff. Or is it that in my mercy and compassion, I'm going to give you a chance to choose a different path, to walk a different way, to end up then in a different place? That's the mercy. That was undeserved, to give you the opportunity then to do something. And then when you do something that's different, that's correct, that's right in the eyes of Yahweh, that brings the approval. Hopefully that makes a whole lot more sense. Let's go now to chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 1. The verses with grace in it are verse 2, 7, and 8. So we got three of them again here in chapter 3. Verse 1, because of this, I, Shaul, am the prisoner of Yeshua Messiah on behalf of you Gentiles. If indeed you have heard of the administration of the favor of Elohim that was given to me for you. So now is he making an argument to them that, hey, if you have indeed heard the administration of the unmerited, undeserved favor that Elohim gave me for you, how does that make any sense? He's saying, look, if indeed you have heard of the administration of approval of Elohim that was given to me for you, that by revelation was made known to me the secret as I wrote before briefly. In reading this, then, you are able to understand my insight into the secret of Messiah, which was not made known to the sons of men in other generations, as it has now been revealed by the Spirit to his set-apart emissaries and prophets, the Gentiles to be co-heirs, united in the same body, and partakers together in the promise in Messiah through the good news, of which I became a servant according to the gift of the favor of Elohim given to me according to the working of his power. He says, I became a servant according to the gift of the favor. So he became a servant. What do servants do? They do whatever the master expects them to do. They do what they're told. Isn't that what a servant does? They're obedient and submissive to their master. And he says, now he became a servant according to the gift. What gift? In mercy and compassion, when he was out there being a Pharisee of Pharisees and killing all of the emissaries, killing all of the believers, and bringing them up on charges and having them killed, he was given a chance to make teshuvah and do things a different way. That was the gift. The gift that was through approval. What approval? He knew, he says, he gave me the gift of the approval of Elohim given to me according to the work of his power. In other words, he gave me this gift so that I can be approved in the working of his power. In his mercy, he called me to do these things. He says, to me, the very least of all the set-apart ones, the favor was given to bring the good news of the unsearchable riches of Messiah among the Gentiles. So to me, the very least of the set-apart ones, this approval was given to me, this good standing. I was approved, or, it's like, look, if I have you in my discipleship program, if I'm training you, if you're a student of mine, at some point I may give you a task. Let's say, if I'm let's say I'm a plumber, or I'm a carpenter, and you're an apprentice with me. I may give you, even if you're the least of my apprentices, I may give you a task that I give you because I can approve of you and want to give you something to do. Even though you may not have been the best star student, you may be the least among all of my students, I may approve of you enough to give you something to do. And I give it to you and you feel good because you know I gave it to you because I approve. It's a way of giving you an encouragement to know that I approve of you. And he says, look, to me, the very least of the set-apart ones, this favor was given to bring the good news of the unsearchable riches of the Messiah among the Gentiles. So he's given a mission. He was given, this thing to do. And it wasn't unmerited. It was merited by what happened when he was given this gift. When Abba called him, what did Paul do? Did he argue and fight against it once he had his eyes cleared? Or did he take up with a passion and with a drive to go out there and do the work he was given? He did something. He had no fear that they were going to look at him like, oh, we know who you are. You're the one who's been killing us. And he walked over to the brother and said, no, I know I did that. I'm not that guy anymore. Any of you have that problem, by the way, with people who knew you in the past? Trying to convince them you're not that guy anymore? You're not that woman anymore? You're not that person anymore? Yeah. Anybody afraid to go meet some of those people from your past because they're not going to believe that you're different now? But Paul had to deal with these people who were not in a very distant past either. They were in a very near past. And he had no fear. He walked out there and did the walking. He says in verse 9, it says, and to make all see how the secret is administered, which for ages past has been hidden in Elohim, who created all through Yeshua Messiah. So you can see here again, the best interpretation of favor is approval, not unmerited. Paul was picked because he merited it. Because Abba knew the end from the beginning, that if I pick Paul, he's going to do the following things. He called you, by the way, the same thing. It was not unmerited. It was unmerited that you deserved it, but you merited it that he knew if he called you, you would listen, you would hear. And there are those who he's called that don't listen because it's not convenient, it's not comfortable, I don't want to deal with my family and friends giving me grief, so they're not hearing the call. But he knew you would hear it. He knew you would respond the way you responded. And so that is merited. You just merited it in advance. Because he sees everything as if it's the end from the beginning. All time is the same. The end is happening at the same time the beginning is happening. He knows everything that's happening, that will happen, has happened, is ever going to happen, all right now. And so he knows that you merited the calling. Because he knew that you would answer that call and that you would heed it and walk it out. And that's the main thing, that you would actually walk out the call. Let's go to chapter 4. Hopefully we'll get through Ephesians today. Chapter 4, and there's two verses there, verse 7, 20, and 29. In chapter 4, we're going to read pretty much the whole chapter here. Chapter 4, verse 1. I call upon you, therefore, I, prisoner of the Master, to walk worthily of the calling in which you were called, with all humility and meekness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, being eager to guard the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. One body, one Spirit, as you also were called in one expectation of your calling. Now let's stop there for a second. I call upon you, therefore, after all this other stuff he's talking about, and already in this book of Ephesians, or this letter to the Ephesians, he's already mentioned grace 9 times. And so if it was unmerited, why is he bothering to say, I call you to walk worthily of the calling? Worthy means something earned. You're considered worthy because you earn the title worthy based on your actions. And so you can't walk worthily of something if there isn't something that means if you walk a different way, you're unworthy. He's saying walk worthily of the calling with which you were called. So the calling was free. The calling was a gift. The calling was mercy and compassion. He called you in his mercy and his compassion, completely unmerited, except for the idea that he knew the end from the beginning, that you would hear the call. He says, however, once you are called, now walk worthily of that calling, so that you get approval. So continuing, he says, one master, one belief, one immersion, one Elohim and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. But to each one of us favor was given according to the measure of the gift of Messiah. So to each one of us approval was given according to the measure of the gift of Messiah. So we have to sit there and go, okay, now what does Paul mean by that? What is the measure of the gift of Messiah? Well, what did Messiah give us as a gift? Well, he died for us. That was a gift. Amen. We did not deserve that. We hadn't earned that. It was completely unmerited. And so to each one of us, approval was given according to the measure. Or you know what? We could actually say just favor. Favor was given to us according to the measure of the gift. According to the measure of the gift of what Messiah had done for us. What did he do? Let's see. Messiah also gave us not only his life, he gave us the truth. What is the truth? The Torah. Who is the lawgiver? Messiah Yeshua was the one on Mount Sinai giving the law. He's the one whose voice they heard. I know that's a whole big other part of another teaching, but we'll get to it eventually. But he is the lawgiver. That's part of his gift. He gave us the law. He gave us his life. He gave us his spirit. He gave us everything. He gave us everything. But to each one of us, favor, grace was given according to the measure. Approval was given. To be in good standing was given according to the measure of the gift of Messiah. By the way, can you be in good standing with the Almighty without the shed blood of Messiah? No. So here's another way of looking at that word again in the Greek. But to each one of us, good standing was given according to the measure of the gift. In other words, according to how you took the gift and what you did with it. The measure of the gift. What did you do? Each one was given a measure or a gift and a talent, and what did they do with it? And the one who was given a measure did nothing with it. It was taken away from him. So according to the measure with which you measure, the measure with which you deal with the gift of Messiah, approval or good standing was given to you. But you could not be in good standing without that gift. Because without that gift, what are you? You're back to chapter 2 again. You're dead in your trespasses and sins. But now you can be reconciled or restored by his blood. However, you don't get to stay restored if you go back to sins and trespasses. Because then you're crucifying him again and again and again and again. And so we're expected to now walk this out and no longer sin and no longer trespass. We're not going to do it perfectly. That's why the blood is still there. So that we can repent and apologize and get on our face and say, I'm sorry, and fix it. And ask, can I come back under the blood? Continuing. Verse 8, that is why it says, when he went up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. But what does, now it says he gave gifts to men. When he went up on high, what gift did he give to men? He says, where I'm going to send a helper. He sent the Spirit, the Ruach. He gives gifts to men. But what does he went up mean, except that he also first went down into the lower parts of the earth? He who went down is also the one who went up far above all the heavens to fill all. And he himself gave some emissaries, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, some as shepherds and teachers, for the perfecting of the set-apart ones, to the work of service, to a building up of the body of Messiah, until we all come to the unity of belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah. Okay, so now let's take what he's talking about, measure here, and bring it back to verse 7. He has given us approval according to the measure of the gift of Messiah. Now we're going to he tells us what he means by that by saying, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah. So we are called to become like Messiah Yeshua. We're called to measure up to that high standard. And so that's what he's talking about. And favor and approval was given according to how we measure up to him. That's right. So now Paul's explaining what he meant in verse 7 as he's going further down. He's saying, look, the more you measure up to your being compared to him, the more Yeshua-like you are, the more approval you get. That's right. Let's continue. He says, until we all come to the unity of belief. So unity of belief also means the unity of an action that comes from belief, and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man. By the way, I believe he's talking about the same idea, perfect, as I say, full of integrity. The man who is filled with integrity, to the measure of the stature of completeness of Messiah. Now listen, verse 14, so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, by trickery of men and cleverness, onto the craftiness of leading astray But maintaining the truth in love, we grow up in all in all respects unto him who is the head Messiah. So let's understand what he's talking about here. So that we're not going to be children tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine to go do the wrong thing. So now we're being told that trespass is truth, sin is no longer sin, that it's okay to do these things. This is what he's talking about. He's saying you should not be confused and borne about and tossed about by everything that says, oh, you know what this is like? This is like the garden where he says, did Yahweh really say you couldn't eat of this tree? Did Yahweh really say? That's what that wind of doctrine sounds like. It says, hey, it's okay. You can do this. That's been done away with. That's no longer necessary. That's not about you. That was for them. This is all that dispensational stuff is exactly what Paul's talking about here. He's saying, don't be swayed by all that dispensational nonsense. He continues, he says, verse 16, from whom the entire body joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the working by which each part does its share, causes growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. Okay, so let's stop there. So notice what he's talking about. He's talking about unity. He started out with that back in the beginning of this when he says, walk worthily in chapter 4, with all humility and meekness, with patience, bearing one another in love, being eager to guard the unity. Does anybody see that in the body?
Come on.
Does anybody see anywhere, and I'm being really serious here, eagerness to guard unity?
Come on. Amen.
I see quickness and eagerness to split and divide. I don't see eagerness to guard the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace.
Amen.
I see eagerness to run and cause strife and divide.
Yes, amen.
So where is all of that here in one body, one spirit, etc., as you were called in one expectation? So now we drop down to verse 16 when he says, look, from which the entire body joined and knit together, from what every joint supplies, causes growth in the body, building of love. He says, so this is what he's talking about. So this I say and witness in the Master, that you should no longer walk as Gentiles walk.
Yes,
in the futility of their mind, having been darkened in their understanding, having been estranged from the life of Elohim, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. Okay, let's understand what he's talking about here. You are not to walk any longer as Gentiles walk. How do Gentiles walk? Back to trespasses and sin. He says, you were dead in trespasses in which you once walked according to the course of this world. What is another word for world? Gentiles. The word Gentiles simply means the nations. Everybody that's not in the camp. Okay, there's no selecting out that nation or this nation. It's everybody not Israel. Everybody outside the camp. He says, you used to walk as all of the nations do, in the futility of their mind. What is the futility of their mind talking about? They think they're right when they're wrong.
Amen.
And they think that they have a path. He says, you know what? There's a way that seems right to a man, but its way leads to death.
That's right.
This is the futility of their mind. It seems right to them. How many times have you heard people come and say, oh, but I know God will be okay with what I just said. God will approve of what I'm doing. God, I'm sure it's okay with him. Really? Are you sure? You bet. And when people say it to me, I say one thing. I say, you better be sure. Because if you're not, you're in big trouble.
Amen.
If you're spinning things, walking in the futility of your mind, also saying, look, he says, being darkened in their understanding. What does darken mean? It says their understanding has become blurry and blurred, and they've now turned what is black and white into gray, and they're allowing for smudging of things and smearing of things to be, well, we can fudge on that a little bit or fudge on this a little bit. We're compromising, exactly. He says, having been estranged from the life of Elohim. The life of Elohim is a life of Torah observance, in belief, submissive to Yeshua. Because of the ignorance that is in them. They just don't know. Worse than that, they don't know that they don't know. He says, because of the hardness of their heart. So all of this is because their hearts are hardened. Hardened in what way? But I don't like. But I don't think. That's not fair. I don't want to. I don't think that I should have to do that. Blah, blah, blah. That's the hardness of their heart. But I like to do this, and I want to do that, and I should be allowed. Well, why can't I do that? What's wrong with that? Is that so bad? That's all that hardness of heart stuff going on. By the way, that's another promotional reason why you should listen to 24 parts of the heart of the matter, because the heart is the matter. He says, look, because of the hardness of the heart, who, having been callous, have given themselves up to indecency, to work uncleanness with greediness. So they're doing things. And so we're supposed to be doing things, but they're doing wrong things. We're supposed to be doing right things. When you do right things, it's called righteousness. When you do wrong things, it's called things like indecency, uncleanness. Those are ways to describe wrong things, greediness. Verse 20, but you have not so learned Messiah.
Yes.
If indeed you have heard him and were taught by him as the truth is in Yeshua,
Amen.
that you put off with regard to your former way of life, the old man being corrupted according to the desires of deceit, and to be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the renewed man, which was created according to Elohim, in righteousness and set apartness of the truth.
Yes.
Oh, but the Christians all think that they are a new creation, a renewed man, doing all the same things.
Yeah.
I'm a renewed man doing paganism and Christmas and Easter and eating pork and all these things. Renewed in what way? He says, look, you are renewed, and a new man renewed, which was created according to Elohim in what? In doing rightly, that's righteousness. In kadosh, set apartness, which means things that are set apart for the single purpose of serving Yahweh. And of truth.
Yes.
What is the truth? Yeshua said, I am the truth.
That's right.
David says the Torah is truth. In Psalm 119, 142, and 160, we're told that the word is truth. So we are supposed to be created into renewed, a new man in Torah observance and submission to Yeshua. Therefore, verse 25, having put off the false, speak truth, each one with his neighbor, for we were members one another. Be wroth, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your rage, nor give place to the devil. Let him who stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, so that he has somewhat to share with those in need. So he says, look, let those who were doing a wrong work now do a good work.
Yeah.
We were called to good works. We read that in a previous verse. He says, verse 29, let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for use of building up, so as to impart what is pleasant to the hearers. Oh, but we spend all our time busy tearing everybody down.
Yes, amen.
And do not grieve the set-apart spirit of Elohim, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption.
Yeah.
What would grieve the set-apart spirit? Well, you're called to do a certain thing, and you refuse in your stubbornness. You're still walking in the old man futility of your own mind. The futility of your own, that grieves the spirit. You keep doing what's in verse 17 and 18 and 19, that's going to grieve the spirit. You keep walking in the futility of your mind, you keep walking in the way of the Gentiles, after you receive the Spirit, that will grieve the Spirit. You do it long enough and the grieving Spirit's not going to hang out.
Amen.
The Spirit's just going to leave.
Right.
Okay, He's going to give you some time, but if you just are stubborn and refusing, the Spirit's going to say, well, then you're on your own. You want to walk in that way, then have at it, but I'm not going to be a part of it.
That's right.
Continuing, verse 31 says, let all bitterness and wrath, displeasure and uproar, slander be put away from you, along with all evil, and be kind towards one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, as Elohim has also forgave you in Messiah.
Amen.
Now, we just read all of that. Is there any thought in all of this that Paul does not expect us to be doing certain things and stop doing certain things? I mean, I don't know how we can get any further into this than to see he absolutely says there is a way that leads to sin and death, and there's a way that leads to life and peace and joy. And there are different things based on, there are different paths of action. You do certain things, and it goes in one path. You do other things, you go down the other path. And so that brings approval or disapproval based on what you do. And that's what the grace thing is all about. Let's go lastly now to chapter 6, and I think we'll be able to squeeze this in to finish the book of Ephesians. And then we'll continue next week with Philippians. Ephesians chapter 6, the word comes up in the word favor. Oh, by the way, I didn't put this out in chapter 4, but the word grace or favor was where it says in verse 29, let no corrupt word come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for the use of building up, so as to impart what is favor, approval to the hearers. That word pleasant is actually the same word charis. And so that, again, so you're trying to impart what is going to bring approval to the hearers. You're trying to tell them, hey, this will bring approval. It's not just pleasantness here. He says, look, I want to impart what is going to bring approval to you. I want to encourage you with that which is good out of my mouth, which is going to be for good use, for building up, and encourage you to do the things that bring favor, to bring approval. Now let's go to chapter 6. And we're going to read pretty much the whole chapter as well. Beginning in verse 1, all of this is to get to the last verse, verse 4. Okay? Verse 24, the last verse. But let's just go through this real quickly because, again, I want you to see all this action in there. Children, obey your parents in the master, for that is right. Now, children, obey your parents. We know that's right. Why? Because it's a commandment.
That's right.
The fifth commandment says, honor mother and father. So children, obey a commandment, the fifth commandment, because that is right. All of Abba's rules and regulations are to teach you what is right. And obeying them declares you righteous, because righteous means that you've been doing rightly. He says, respect your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, in order that it might be well with you and you might live long on the earth. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children, but bring them up in the instruction and admonition of the master. So what's the instruction and admonition of the master? Well, the master is Messiah. He is the lawgiver. He's also the walking, talking Torah. He is the truth. So we're bringing them up in the admonition of all that the master is. Servants, obey your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and sincerity of heart as to Messiah, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Messiah, doing the desire of Elohim from the inner self, rendering service with pleasure as to the master and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he shall receive the same from the master, whether he is a slave or free. By the way, this could easily be talking to the servants of the body, as opposed to the servants of actual enslavement. By saying, servants, obey your masters. Okay, so that means your servants in the congregation obey the leadership of the congregation. He says, but look, but do these things as you're doing it as to Messiah. That you're doing things on the Messiah. And by the way, even the leadership of our servants to Messiah himself. And so they need to also do what it is to be a servant. But don't do things, don't render your service as to seeking that which is of men. He says, do not do that. He says, don't be men pleasers. Don't give eye service and lip service and all that other stuff. He says, do these things unto Messiah. And masters, do the same to them. Refrain from threatening, verse 9, knowing that your own master also is in the heavens and there is no partiality with him. For the rest, my brothers, be strong in the master and in the mightiness of his strength. Put on the complete armor of Elohim for you to have power to stand against the schemes of the devil. Because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against the world rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual matters of wickedness in the heavenlies. Because of this, take up the complete armor of Elohim, so that you have the power to withstand in the wicked day, and having done all to stand. Stand then, having girded your waist with the Torah, with the truth, with Yeshua, and having put on the breastplate of right doings, right action, righteousness, and having fitted your feet with the preparation of the good news of peace. So what does the feet represent? How you walk, what you're doing. Above all, having taken up the shield of belief, with which you shall have the power to quench all the burning arrows of the wicked one. So belief into action, all of this is connecting together. Take also the helmet of deliverance and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim. So the sword of the Spirit is the word. So this is your sword, your scripture, your word of Elohim. Praying at all times with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, watching in all perseverance and supplication for the set-apart ones. Now, I'm not going to get into any of the breakdown of the armor. We have a whole teaching called the armor of Elohim. It is called on the table over there. Also for me, that a word might be given to me in the opening of my mouth, to be bold in making known the secret of the good news, for which I am an envoy in chains, that in it I might speak boldly as I should speak. Now, in order that you also might know about me, how I am doing, Tuchikos, a beloved brother and trustworthy servant in the master, shall make all matters known to you, whom I did send to you for this same purpose, so that you know about us and might encourage your hearts. Peace to the brothers and love with belief from the Elohim, the Father and the Master Yeshua Messiah. Favor be with all of those who love our Master Yeshua Messiah undecayingly. Amen. Approval be with all those who love our Master Yeshua Messiah. And the word undecayingly really has to do with genuineness or sincerity. So genuinely or sincerely, amen. Genuinely or succinctly, amen. So hopefully we saw here in the book of Ephesians a continuing of the idea that we just have no way to make a case for unmerited favor for the word charis, or the word grace. We can see it where we see compassion. We saw that for sure in chapter 2, that in his mercy and his compassion, he was willing to call you out of your trespassing in sin and make you alive in Messiah. But we don't see unmerited things going in terms of the approval places where that verse is. And by the way, you can see these are those key important verses that are used in the argument, which is why we chose the word charis and not the word elios. Because we had to know, what do we do with the verse that says, for by grace you've been saved through belief, not of yourselves, it is the gift, it is not by works. That is now one of the verses you hear over and over and over and over again. So should we not be studying out the word that underlies that Greek word there? What the Greek word there is, for favor? That's the word we need to understand. Not a word that's being used as mercy everywhere else in scriptures, because that word really does mean mercy, and that's what it is. It's mercy. But this word is the word that is in all of these troubling, challenging verses. But I'm hoping that now that we've read through Ephesians and Galatians and Colossians, no, we didn't get to Colossians yet, but Corinthians, that we're getting a much clearer picture that there is no inconsistency here. There is no inconsistency here. Charis, grace, means approval or good standing in the eyes of the Almighty. Let's go before the Father. Father, we come before you, seeking your approval, Father, seeking to understand fully what brings your approval, puts us in good standing in your eyes. Father, we want to understand the fullness of Messiah. We want to be made alive in Messiah. We want to be receiving all that things that would bring approval and ultimately salvation. Father, we know it's not by our efforts. We know it's by our belief that we do these things, and that it's not just of works that we could say, hey, I did this, I did that, you owe me. It's not about that. We do it because we appreciate so much what you've done for us that it's our minimum service to do what is right in your eyes. It's because we owe you, not because you owe us. Father, we do these things because we owe you. We owe you everything. We owe you for our lives. We owe you for every breath. We owe you for your mercy. These are all the minimum things we can do to show you in an expression of our love that we love you, that we appreciate you, that we're so thankful for everything you do, that the least we can do is obey you. It's our minimum service. The least we can do is what you've asked us to do. So, Father, help us. Give us more of the gift of belief. Fill us with belief. Fill us with your Spirit. Help us to become more filled and brought up to the measure of Messiah, so that we can grow up to the measure of Messiah Yeshua and be favor upon favor, approval upon approval in your eyes. Father, help us to truly have a desire to be eager to guard the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Father, we have been so eager to split and divide. Now help us to be eager to guard the unity. Father, we are so desiring to truly understand your word. It's been so smudged and messed with and just turned into things that it was never meant to be. Help us to peel away all of all of that yuck and all of that convolution and all of the murkiness, and just bring us to clear, crystal clear understanding of the light of your truth, the light of your word. Father, we come to you now humbly, just appreciating so much, asking all these things in the authority of your Son, asking in the authority of our Messiah, asking in the authority of our coming King, our advocate who stands at your right hand, asking in the name of Yeshua Messiah. We come before you now, and we say together, Amen, Amen.